as we discussed in the parliamentary model, the ministers are chosen from the parliament as well as they are also accountable to the same parliament. And as we discussed, there is no strict separation of power in the parliamentary model. Rather, we see the fusion of power between the executive and legislative in the parliamentary system. Now, having understood the key features of this parliamentary system, let us try to understand the advantages of this parliamentary system. What are the benefits this parliamentary system is going to bring to the table? If our constitutional founding fathers has chosen this parliamentary system, then there has to be certain reasons why they have chosen it. So we'll now try to understand the very advantages of this parliamentary system. Advantage number one is the enhanced coordination. Enhanced coordination between whom? Between the executive and the legislature. As we discussed, the people of India elect the members of parliament. They form the legislature. Now, it is from these 543 members of parliament of Lok Sabha and 245 members of Rajya Sabha that the Council of Ministers is chosen from the ruling government. So there is a nexus between the executive and the legislature in India. Now, why this is a benefit? Because once there is a close coordination between this executive and legislature. For example, if you take the present government, the NDA government has more than approximately 290 members in the Lok Sabha. And it is the ministers of this government are also belonging to the same party. So it becomes easy for them in the law making as well as policy implementation because the ruling party members are also part of both executive as well as legislature. So what it does, it leads to more efficient governance. Now there is a downside to it also that we will be discussing in the challenges of the parliamentary system. So what is the second advantage? The second advantage is direct accountability. What is this direct accountability? The Council of Ministers are directly answerable to the Parliament. The Council of Ministers are directly answerable to the Parliament. That is, the Parliament, the members of the elected representatives can ask questions to these Council of Ministers. And not just that, if the government loses confidence in the Lok Sabha, then the Parliament can also remove the government through a vote of no confidence. This symbolizes direct accountability. Next, we have something called as flexible executive replacement. Now, what is this flexible executive replacement? Let us assume, see, I'll explain this with an example. Today, we have NDA government ruling at the center. Now, let us assume two political parties which are also part of NDA, TDP and JDU. Let us assume tomorrow if this TDP and JDU is withdrawing the support from the ruling coalition, then what happens to the number of the ruling coalition? They come down to less than 273. When the number is less than 273, now why 273? Because the ruling party should have more than 50% of the total members of Lok Sabha. And the total number of representatives in Lok Sabha is 543. The half of this is approximately, or more than half of this is 272. Now, if tomorrow JDU and TDP withdraws the power from the NDA coalition, the number of NDAs comes down to less than 272, which means that they will not be able to rule in the national level. Now, let us assume this JDU and TDP is giving or pledging their support to the opposition India bloc. Then there are chances that the opposition India bloc can have more than 273 members of Lok Sabha. So what is happening? Without an election, there can be a replacement in the executive or leadership changes or votes of no confidence. They allow for swift executive replacement. So this offers greater adaptability. That is, without having any election, we can have a new government at the center ruling for the remainder term. So this is another advantage of the parliamentary system. Next, next we have something called as broader representation. Now, what is this broader representation? As we know that as the members contest for the Lok Sabha election, there are certain seats that are reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. And also a new amendment has come providing a reservation for women. And we also know that in India, we see leaders from diverse regions or diverse identities also representing their own people. So, what does it indicate? It indicates a broader representation. In a diverse nation like India, the parliamentary system enables varied groups to gain representation through elected members of parliament. But what is happening in the presidential model? In the presidential model, the president can choose anyone he chooses to be the defense secretary or the finance secretary or any other part of executive. That is not the case in parliamentary system. So the advantages of the parliamentary system is that number one, it has an enhanced coordination between the legislative and executive. Number two, it provides for the direct accountability of the legislature to the of the direct accountability of the executive to the legislature. Number three, it has options for flexible executive replacement by providing opportunity for the opposition parties to stake claim for the governance. And number four, it also provides a greater scope for the broader representation of the people from diverse groups. So these are the advantages of the parliamentary system. Now, now let us try to understand the challenges of this parliamentary system. As I said, see, any aspect has two sides to it. We have seen the advantages of the parliamentary system. Now let us try to understand the disadvantages or the challenges of the parliamentary system. Number one in that is that the executive dominance. Now, what is this executive dominance? For example, let us assume the government that is formed by party X tomorrow at the national level. Let us assume they have approximately more than 340 members. For example, out of 540 in Lok Sabha, more than 340 members are from the same party. So what happens there is that the opportunity for the opposition parties to raise the issues becomes very important because ultimately democracy is practiced mainly through numbers. So any party which has more numbers can simply have a dominance over the other parties. So a strong majority can lead to executive overshadowing the legislature. And when this happens, the the ultimate result is that it undermines the checks and balances that is provided in the parliamentary system. Number two, the second challenge is that political instability. Now, what is this political instability? As I gave the example of PDP and JDU withdrawing the support from the ruling NDA and pledging their support to the India alliance. If that happens, what is the result? The result is that there will be instability in the governance. Suddenly, a new government will be coming to the power at the center. So, it will lead to instability and frequent disruptions in the administration. So, in a country like India, which has multi-party system, where multiple parties are prevalent and where coalition government is the everyday norm of the parliamentary system, it can lead to easy instability in the governance of the country. The next disadvantage is that decision making inefficiency. Now, what is this decision making inefficiency? For example, you might have seen the proceedings of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. There are disruptions whenever a new bill has to be passed. You see a lot of disruptions by the opposition members. And not just that, you also see sometimes the ruling party or the speaker who is supposed to be impartisan or non-partisan or neutral, not providing adequate opportunity for the now, when this happens, there becomes a difficulty to obtain consensus. So any decision has to be passed in the parliamentary system through consensus. The need for this consensus and these complex processes can sometimes make the decision making in the parliament appear slow or inefficient. So these are the challenges of the parliamentary system. Let me try to recall the challenges of the parliamentary system. Number one is that they have or they can lead to the executive dominance through a strong majority. Number two, the coalition governments, mainly present in a multi-party system, can lead to political instability. And not just that, the need for consensus or the presence of disruptions in the proceedings of the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha or the proceedings of the parliament can lead to inefficiency in the decision making. So these are the challenges of the parliamentary system. So now, since we have understood the features of the parliamentary system, the advantages and the challenges of the parliamentary system, it is important for us to compare this parliamentary system with the presidential model of governance. As I told, presidential model is the model that is practiced in the United States of America. And parliamentary model is something that is practiced in the United Kingdom or in our own India. So now let us try to analyze the difference between this parliamentary model and the presidential model. Now, once we analyze this difference, it becomes easy for us to identify why we have chosen parliamentary model and not presidential model. Because every now and then, certain times, you see a lot of recommendations coming from the various sides that it is time that we move to presidential model. But this comparison will help you identify why parliamentary model was chosen ahead of the presidential model. Let us come to the parliamentary model. As you see, in parliamentary model, there is something called as fusion of powers. Now, what is this fusion of powers? As we discussed, the executive or the council of ministers, they are drawn from the members of parliament. And not just that, they are also accountable to the parliament. So accountability and responsibility forms the crux of this parliamentary model. Now, what happens in the presidential model? In presidential model, the executive, that is the president, and the legislative branches are distinct and independent. That is, if you take the example of the United States, the US president is not answerable to the US Congress. So what does this indicate? This indicates that there is lack of accountability and there is lack of responsibility and transparency in the presidential model. So we can also say that the separation of power that is practiced in the presidential model is strict separation of power, whereas the separation of power that is practiced in the parliamentary model is not strict separation, rather it is flexible separation of power. Next, we also discussed in the parliamentary model that we have a nominal head, that is president, who is the head of the state, and we have a real head, that is the prime minister, who is also the head of the government. So there is dual leadership in the parliamentary model. But what happens in the presidential model? In the presidential model, there is just a single executive. What is the single executive? The single executive is nothing but the president serves as both the head of the state and the head of the government. Now, when we come to the presidential model itself, that is, India also has the presidential model and the United Kingdom also, so India also has the parliamentary model and the United Kingdom also has the parliamentary model. But there is a slight difference in the parliamentary model that is practiced in India as well as the United Kingdom. Now, what is this difference? India is a republic, whereas United Kingdom is not a republic. Rather, it is a monarchy. Now, what is this difference? In India, the president is also elected. Though the president is not directly elected, but still the president of India is also elected. And this office of the president of India is open to anybody, provided certain qualifications are met. Now, what are these qualifications? We will be discussing late in the later chapters. But what happens in the United Kingdom, or what happens in the British? In Britain, this head of the government, sorry, this head of the state is not elected. Rather, it is always fixed for the family, for one particular family. And that is why you see the head of the state in Britain is the Queen of Britain. So, number one, they are not elected. Number two, this office is not open to all. There is another difference in the parliamentary model practiced in India and UK. Now, what is this difference? In UK, the parliament is supreme. The parliament can, it was also said by one of the political commentators that if the parliament wishes, it can do anything except turning a man into a woman or a woman into a man. Such is the sovereignty of the parliament that is present in the United Kingdom. But what about India? Is the parliament supreme in India? Is the parliament sovereign in India? The answer is no. Then who is sovereign in India? The answer for that is it is the constitution that is sovereign in India. Now, coming to the third difference. The third difference is the flexible tenure. For example, tomorrow, if the elections are held for Nusra, this does not mean that once the elections are held, this government will continue on for 5 years. Because as I said, if there is a coalition government, if some political parties withdraw the power from the ruling coalition, then what happens? Then the government will fall, and it provides an opportunity for the opposition parties to stake claim for the governments. Or in other words, the government in the parliamentary model can be removed by a vote of no confidence. And if the opposition parties cannot stake claim or cannot garner enough support or cannot garner more than 50% of the elected representatives in that side, then it will lead to the new elections. And this is what happened in the tumultuous time from the year 1996 to 1999. You can see the political history of India. In these 3 years, we had multiple prime ministers. There was a government of Atal Bihari Vajpayee which survived for only 13 days because the coalition parties withdrew their support. So there is something called as flexible tenure. But what about the presidential model? The presidential model has a fixed tenure. That is, the president of US is appointed for a fixed 4-year term. And he or she is not subject to the vote of no confidence also. So this can be a positive as well as a negative. Now, what is the positive? There will be a continuity in the governance. But what is the negative aspect? The accountability or the responsibility part is curtailed in the presidential model. The next important difference is the responsibility aspect. Now, what is this responsibility aspect? There is something called as collective responsibility. The cabinet, that is the council of ministers, or the, see, when we say the council of ministers, there are actually different forms or different spectrum of the council of ministers. For example, there is council of ministers, there is cabinet, and there is also other ministers. Now, these details we will be discussing in our coming videos. But for now, let us simply understand that the council of ministers is collectively responsible to whom? To the parliament. That is, if the government falls, all the ministers has to automatically resign. If the prime minister resigns, then also all the ministers also has to resign from the government. So this shows that the council of ministers or the cabinet is collectively responsible to the parliament. But what happens in the presidential model? As I said, in the presidential model, the president can appoint any person he or she likes to be the member of his executive. When the president is appointing any person to be a member of his or her executive, what it means? It means that the members of this executive is answerable to whom? They are not answerable to the parliament of that country. Rather, they are only answerable to the president of that country. So it shows the individual accountability. So this is the difference between the parliamentary model and the presidential model of governance. Now let us try to recall what we have studied so far. So we studied that as per the article number 79, as per article number 79, there shall be a parliament for the center which has president and the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. And we also studied the important functions of the parliament. That is, parliament acts as the supreme lawmaking body. The parliament has the power to amend the constitution. The parliament also has the power to seek accountability from the executive. The parliament also acts as the custodian of the consolidated fund of India. Apart from that, we also studied about the parliamentary system of governance that is practiced in India. Now, what is the core aspect of this parliamentary model of governance? It is nothing but the responsibility or the accountability of the executive to the parliament or to the legislative. So, meanwhile, we also studied the key features of the parliamentary model. That is, the parliamentary model has something called as collective responsibility. It has dual responsibility. There are fusion of power between the legislature and executive and so on. Meanwhile, we also studied certain challenges of this parliamentary model. Now, what were those challenges? It can lead to instability. It can also lead to ineffectiveness in the decision making. And it can also lead to the dominance of the executive if there is a majority government at the center. Next, we also try to understand or we also try to compare the parliamentary model and the presidential model. Now, the difference between the parliamentary model and the presidential model is that the presidential model, there is complete separation of power, but in the parliamentary model, there is a flexible separation of power. In the presidential model, the president serves as both the head of the state as well as the head of the government. But in the parliamentary model, there is a dual leadership. That is, the president acts as the head of the state in India and the prime minister acts as the head of the government in India. Next, in the presidential model, there is something called as fixed tenure. That is, the president serves a fixed term. But in the parliamentary model, the tenure is not fixed, rather, it is flexible. Also, in the parliamentary model, the cabinet is collectively responsible to the parliament. But on the other side, in the presidential model, the ministers are not responsible to their parliament, rather, they are responsible to the president of that government. So, the best example for the presidential model is India, and the best example for the parliamentary model is India. Sorry, the best example for the presidential model is the United States of America, and the best example for the parliamentary model is Britain or India. So, these are the things that we have studied. So, this chapter of parliament is a very important component for both of your prelims as well as mains. So, I hope that the basic aspect or the basic concept of this chapter of parliament is understood to each of you all. I hope that whenever a question comes of this topic, you will be able to answer them in a very wonderful manner. The other aspects of the parliament, having covered these basics, we will also be dealing with the other aspects of the chapter of Indian Parliament in our coming videos. We'll be discussing in detail about the Lok Sabha, about the Rajya Sabha, about the passage of different bills, about the different offices that are present in the Parliament, etc. So, thank you one and all for your patience. I hope you will be gaining immensely from this video. Thank you.